Thank you so much for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm from Graham. Ahead today, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu warning the dangerous surge in anti-Semitism on U.S. college campuses will have terrible consequences and could be a signal of a major conflict ahead. A new Hamas propaganda video shows an Israeli-American hostage is still alive as his parents encourage him to stay strong and survive. Here in the U.S., the Supreme Court hearing a major case on abortion involving a state law which bans almost all abortions. And the controversy over the Biden administration's move to redo federal regulations and allow biological men to take part in female sports. All those stories and more ahead today, right here on CBN NewsWatch.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
Let's begin this half hour with a warning from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The anti-Semitism in the protest on U.S. college campuses is a warning of a larger conflict still to come. And a Middle East analyst tells CBN News it's like Nazi Germany in the 1930s. Chris Mitchell brings us the story from Jerusalem.
Protesters clashing with police at the University of Texas as officers move in, arresting dozens. At USC, nearly 100 demonstrators were taken into custody. As the protest spread to more college campuses across America, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu railed against the anti-Semitic and anti-American rioters.
Anti-Semitic mobs have taken over leading universities. They call for the annihilation of Israel. They attack Jewish students. They attack Jewish faculty. When you listen to them, it's also because they say not only death to Israel, death to the Jews, but death to America. And this tells us that there's an anti-Semitic surge here that has terrible consequences.
Netanyahu added a warning about this exponential rise in anti-Semitism.
We have to stop anti-Semitism because anti-Semitism is the canary in the coal mine. It always precedes larger conflagrations that engulf the entire world.
Speaker of the House Mike Johnson and several colleagues came to witness the upheaval at Columbia. He called on Columbia's president to resign if she can't get the campus under control immediately.
As Speaker of the House, I am committing today that the Congress will not be silent as Jewish students are expected to run for their lives and stay home from their classes hiding in fear.
Johnson also threatened to stop federal funds to universities that don't create a safe environment for Jewish students. Dr. Michael Widlanski, an alumnus of Columbia and Middle East analyst, told CBN News his former campus reminds him of Germany in the 1930s.
It's Nazi Germany. It starts with delegitimizing somebody, trying to browbeat them into the ground, to scare them to staying in their holes, their huddles, their caves, so that they won't come out. It's the time that my father went through in Europe. His whole family was wiped out by Nazis. We know what Nazis can do. We know what this can lead to.
The protesters call Israel an apartheid state and accuse the government of committing genocide in Gaza for its war on Hamas after the terror group killed 1,200 Israelis on October 7th and still hold more than 100 hostages. Wednesday, Hamas released a propaganda video showing one of those still in captivity, American Hersh Goldberg-Polin. In a video, his parents expressing relief to see their son alive and encouraging him to endure.
Hersh, if you can hear this, we heard your voice today for the first time in 201 days. And if you can hear us, I am telling you, we are telling you, we love you, stay strong, survive.
Meanwhile, the UN is calling for an investigation into accusations of mass graves around Gaza hospitals that saw intense fighting recently. Israel released a statement that the claims are baseless. Hamas has also proposed a 5-year ceasefire if a two-state solution is implemented, but Israel steadfastly rejects the idea of a Palestinian state.
Chris Mitchell joins us now from Jerusalem with more. So, Chris, when Hamas says it wants a ceasefire, what do the leaders really have in mind?
Well, Ephraim, when you listen to the Hamas spokesperson, he really talks about the occupation, first of all, and there's been no occupation in Gaza since 2005, when Israel unilaterally pulled out. And they also said that they have a legitimate reason to resist the occupation on October 7th. That would mean the raping, murdering, burning babies, and beheading. what he talks about, Ephraim, is a ceasefire of 5 years or more. And what he's talking about is called a hudna. This is a ceasefire in Islam of a fixed duration. Historically, the Prophet Muhammad struck a 10-year hudna in the 7th century, and that was with the Quraysh tribe. But when he rearmed and became stronger, he broke the truce and defeated that tribe. And this is the understanding for Muslims like Hamas. The ceasefire or truce is just a temporary period until they can become stronger enough to attack the infidels.
Chris, Netanyahu is warning that the surge in anti-Semitism that we're seeing could be a precursor of a bigger conflict ahead. How seriously is the concern being taken there in Israel?
Well, it's taken very seriously. I can hear from Dr. Michael Widlanski. I mean, this is bringing back memories of the Holocaust. When I watched Benjamin Netanyahu, I've seldom seen him so passionate about this. And as I said, it takes many Jews back to the 1930s. Many Israelis have a collective memory of what happened then. Could be their parents or their grandparents or some family member, or their family may have been wiped out by the Holocaust. So almost everyone has some connection to the Holocaust. So it's taken very seriously here, and it's also taken very seriously in America. Many American Jews are deeply troubled by what's going on. It may affect the decisions of what schools their kids go to, may affect who they vote for. In fact, a prominent reform rabbi warned Democrats recently, don't take the Jewish vote for granted. And also, it may make some Jews in America or other places have them move here to Israel, where they feel it's safer despite all the threats that Israel's facing.
Israel is facing challenges on a number of fronts. Can you give us some details on the multiple difficulties you're seeing right now?
Well, Ephraim, I was thinking about this the other day when many Israelis are feeling they're facing an existential threat, fighting for their survival, and here's why. If you look at the military fronts, you have Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, Iranian militias in Syria and Iraq. You have Iran that fired 350 projectiles just about 2 weeks ago. Then you have the possibility of a nuclear round. On the diplomatic front, you have the international court threatening Israeli leaders, including Netanyahu, with arrest. Nations like Colombia, Brazil, threatening to cut off relations if Israel goes into the Rafah. You look at the social media front, TikTok. For every one positive post, there may be more than 50 anti-Israel posts. Then you look at the college campuses so multiple ways and fronts that Israel's facing. But on the other hand, Israel and the Jewish people have survived empires before, the Assyrians, Babylonians, the Romans, the Nazis. The saying by many people here is, Am Israel High, the people of Israel live. And as one said to me many years ago, God has bet long on the Jews.
What can you tell us about this propaganda hostage video with Hersh Goldberg-Polin?
Well, the good news is that he's alive, and I know that's a big relief to his parents. And you have to have sympathy for what he's gone through for more than 200 days. But he blamed Netanyahu and the government for not accepting any of the deals by Hamas, called on the government to resign, and so you can sympathize with him. But obviously, he's been influenced by Hamas, then more than 200 days in captivity, and Hamas has released this as a propaganda video to just stir up Israelis.
The White House warns answers from Israel about this report from Hamas of mass graves near a hospital in Gaza. What can you tell us about that?
Well, the IDF says it's baseless, and here's why. It was actually the Palestinians who buried many of their fighters during fighting a few months ago in what's called the Nasser Medical Complex, and that's in Khan Yunis. It's corroborated by footage actually on social media that in late January and February, it was Palestinians digging those mass graves. So what the IDF is saying is that people and media like Al Jazeera are using this as just information and a way to demonize Israelis.
Chris, here in the U.S., the former Speaker of the House, Democrat Nancy Pelosi, is calling on Benjamin Netanyahu to resign. Where does he stand now with Israel publicly?
Well, he's doing much better, and probably he's doing much better politically than ever time since October 7th. He's having the highest levels in the polls. His political party, called the Likud, has 21 seats, and the coalition that he serves in now would likely get more seats in the opposition. He's also closed the gap for Prime Minister with Benny Gantz. Benny Gantz has about 42% popularity. Netanyahu about 37%. So despite an onslaught of protests, demonstrations against Netanyahu, it's been a vocal minority in the streets. Most Israelis support his leadership. Pelosi says he's an obstacle to a two-state solution. Well, it's really the Israeli public that the obstacle. After October 7th, there's no appetite here among the majorities of Israelis for a two-state solution.
All right, Chris Mitchell joining us from Jerusalem. Thanks so much for your insight. Stay safe. We back here continue to pray for you and our entire team there in Israel. Coming up here at home, the Supreme Court hearing a major case on abortion, the role of government, and a possible nationwide mandate on abortion. We're going to have that story for you when we come back. You're watching CBN NewsWatch.
Get your daily quick start from CBN News. A quick read on the important news of the day delivered right to your inbox. Stay current on breaking news, politics, and entertainment. Go to quickstart.news and subscribe today.
The Supreme Court will soon decide whether to strike down Idaho's near-total ban on abortion. The High Court heard arguments Wednesday. As Lori Johnson reports, critics say the case is an attempt by the Biden administration to reinstate a nationwide abortion mandate.
Pro-choice, that's a lie! Babies never choose to die!
Demonstrators on both sides of the abortion divide made their voices heard at the U.S. Supreme Court.
I don't want legislators telling me what I can do with my body.
Abortion is murder!
CBN's Tara Mergener was outside the High Court as it heard the second abortion case in the past month.
The outcome of this Idaho case will have nationwide implications, particularly in other places like Texas, that will only allow an abortion if the mother will likely die otherwise.
The Idaho law allows doctors to perform abortions only to save the mother's life. The Biden administration argues that violates a federal law known as EMTALA, the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act, which requires hospitals to stabilize ER patients who can't pay. Idaho denies the charge.
Idaho's law and EMTALA are consistent. They both seek to protect the lives of women and their unborn children.
Conservative justices pointed out EMTALA doesn't specifically mention abortion, but does identify an unborn child as a patient.
So in that situation, the hospital must stabilize the threat to the unborn child. And it seems that the plain meaning is that the hospital must try to eliminate any immediate threat to the child. But performing an abortion is antithetical to that duty.
The Biden administration says EMTALA requires doctors to perform abortions in cases where a woman's health is threatened, not just her life.
For example, a lot of times a pregnant woman in distress, she might start suffering liver damage or kidney malfunction.
Attorney Josh Turner, representing the state, suggested that could be interpreted to include mental health. He accused the Biden administration of trying to use the federal law to reinstate a nationwide abortion mandate.
There are 22 states with abortion laws on the books. This isn't going to end with Idaho because all of the states that have abortion regulations define the health and the emergency exception narrower than EMTALA does. And so this question is going to come up in state after state after state.
Lori Johnson, CBN News.
On the issue of conscience, the Biden administration says the federal law in question does not call for doctors who oppose abortion to be required to perform them. The court will issue its decision on this case sometime in June. Still ahead, the Biden administration's move to rewrite federal regulations to allow biological men to take part in women's sports. We're going to take a look at the controversy over their action right after this. Some are saying bye-bye biological reality since the Biden administration has rewritten Title IX regulations to include gender identity. in the Department of Education rules forbidding discrimination based on sex. Appearing on this week's episode of The Global Lane, Angela Morabito of the Defense of Freedom Institute explains this means any school receiving federal funds must allow biological males to take part in female sports.
Title IX has stood for 50 years to prevent discrimination on the basis of sex in educational activities and programs receiving federal funding. And the Biden administration's new rule, it's really not an executive order, it's a rule that's come from the Department of Ed, is redefining sex in the law to include gender identity. So now, instead of treating students at school based on their biological sex, schools are going to be required to treat them based on the gender that they feel that they are. This creates a huge problem, particularly when it comes to sports, because the Biden administration has just decided that allowing men and women's sports is no longer a Title IX violation. Same with restrooms and locker rooms. And it creates a huge problem for everyone. It's a massive step back for due process and for the rights of women in schools.
Well, as you mentioned, we know this will have a chilling effect on women's sports. So why aren't more feminists and progressives speaking out about this? Because isn't this a violation of the rights of the majority, women and girls? It discriminates against them as they try to protect others.
Absolutely. And that is the million-dollar question. Anyone who says that they believe in women's rights should be upset by this new rule, and they should be standing up against it. And the Biden administration has been very careful to say, oh, no, we're not devastating women's sports. But they absolutely are. They've just decided they're not going to enforce Title IX the way it was written, and that states now can allow men and women's sports, locker rooms, restrooms, dorms, wherever. And the Biden administration will simply sit on its hands and do nothing about it. They also have a separate rule that is specifically about athletics that is coming expected later in the year, although no one is exactly certain. And that rule is expected to force schools to allow men and women's sports. So it's a very sad day for women in schools, especially female athletes. And the Biden administration is just intent on making things worse.
And it isn't only a sports competition. Rules like these have already been imposed on Christian colleges. Similar rules at HUD were imposed on College of the Ozarks. I'm sure you remember that one, requiring them to allow males and females to share shower and bathroom facilities. So what's the likelihood that Title IX, this rule change, will force co-ed showers and bathrooms everywhere, public schools, or at least require biological male transgenders to use female locker rooms everywhere?
It is tremendously frightening. And, while Title IX does certainly cover colleges, it also applies from kindergarten, even pre-K, all the way up through the education system. And one of the things it does that people need to be aware of is it forces schools to treat students based on their gender identity. And that includes the name and pronouns that they want to use. So if someone is repeatedly, quote unquote, misgendered or dead named, or a teacher decides, no, I'm going to call a he and a she is she, and I'm not going to play into what that child happens to believe about themselves that day, that teacher could be found to be creating a hostile environment. That's a problem. The teacher should not have their speech compelled or controlled by the government. They shouldn't be forced to play into what a child believes about themselves rather than uphold the truth. Now, here's the kicker. The Biden administration thinks misgendering can create a hostile environment, but a man in a woman's locker room cannot. It is just plain ridiculous, and I think the American public see that. They don't want this rule.
So Angela, what's being done to try to reverse this executive action? I guess it isn't an executive action. It just is Biden administration policy of the Department of Education.
It is. So the rule is slated to take effect in August, and there are quite a few things that could happen both before and after then. While I can't speak to exactly what will happen in the immediate aftermath, I know that Congress has a chance to take a stand here and say no. There's always the Congressional Review Act is an option. There is also the potential for a new administration to come in and just yank the rule and say this is absolutely wrong. It is an inversion of the law that robs the civil rights law of its initial meaning and replaces it with radical politics. So an upcoming administration has the chance to make a change as well.
Well, I mean, you get a new administration and then they take it and make it one way, and then a new one comes in after that, changes it like we've seen. How do we get around that?
Well, I think it's important important to note that there was, prior to this Biden administration rule, a 2020 rule from former Secretary Betsy DeVos that was working. It had great due process protections in place that was protecting all students. There was no need for the Biden administration to go in and create a new rule that overwrote one that was working really, really well. So this isn't a matter of reinventing the wheel. It should be a matter of going back to the 2020 DeVos rule that was working, that was upholding students' civil rights.
Okay, I'm sure there will be lawsuits as well. Angela Morabito of the Defense of Freedom Institute. Thank you, Angela, for sharing your insights. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Gary.
Also on this week's episode of The Global Lane, voters in the world's largest democracy head to the polls. What a victory for the BJP party may mean for Christians in India and anti-Semitic protests on American college campuses, a prelude to World War III we'll explore. You can see it all on The Global Lane this evening on the CBN News Channel. It begins at 8 Eastern. You can also see it on the CBN News app, or you can watch it on YouTube. We'll be right back with an encouraging word for your day ahead. Stay with us.
Download the CBN News app, 24/7 news from a Christian perspective at home or on the road. One place for all of your news. Breaking news alerts. Set daily prayer goals and pray for news stories. Read the most important news and watch CBN News Channel live. CBN News, because truth matters. Go to cbnnewsapp.com to get the app today.
Welcome back to CBN NewsWatch. Time now for your Thursday Thankful. I encourage you to join me in this prayer of gratitude. Father, I thank you for being faithful. You're always present and always loving me. You are a God of your word, and you promise never to leave me, never to forsake me. You never, ever leave me alone. And to that prayer, may we all say together, amen and amen. That will do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. You can always find more of our news programs on the CBN News Channel. You can also find them online at cbnnews.com at any time. Take a moment, let us know what you think of the stories that you're seeing here today. Email us, newswatch@cbn.com. And then come on back and join us right here tomorrow. Goodbye and God bless.